Awesome. All right. We have one last case study, and so we are really in the home stretch. And I'm actually very excited that it's my good friend David Wiki, who is now the chairman of PBWorks. Is that right? Yeah. The chairman.
I've got one of these shirts that says Chairman Meow, you know. Is this a video? Yee. God, it looks a little scary. Yeah. So I'm going to be pretty quick here. The good news is you can put your notebooks away because I'm just going to be underlining pretty much everything that you've learned today, illustrating it with a couple case studies from what's happened at what the company formerly known as PBWiki, currently known as PBWorks. And our name change, actually, was one of the many pivots that we've done. All right, hands up if you've used PBWiki or PBWorks in any way. Sweet! We've got users in the room. Awesome. So I just have to say, after Steve Blank's presentation, I'm really glad that I like bowling, just in case things go south. So I have found that success is adaptation. I've had to adapt a lot. I started off this whole entrepreneurship thing knowing nothing about business, having no formal training in business, a lot of background in engineering. I started programming at the age of 5 on an Apple IIc, so I had a lot of background in that. But I didn't know anything at all about business. And so I knew I was dumb going into this. And if there's one of the themes that you should be able to pick out among the entrepreneurs who've gotten up here today is that a lot of them will just flat out tell you, I have no idea what the bloody hell I'm doing. And that kind of humility, coupled with, to be frank, the hubris that they will eventually figure something out, I think makes for a pretty good entrepreneur. So what are the different ways that we've adapted, that we've iterated? You've already gone over some of the basics of agile programming and being surprised at uses and users, and pivoting, changing what it is that your company is and does when you recognize that you have a slightly different use case and a slightly different audience than you were expecting. So I'm going to walk you through in just a moment a couple of the different pivots that we've done. Now these pivots have all come from actually getting face-to-face with users, talking with them. We've done analytics in a fair amount of depth from very, very early on. That kind of breadth of data, seeing what everyone is doing that comes to your site, is really helpful, and you can make some educated decisions. But that mainly serves as an oracle function. You can tell whether or not your hypothesis was correct or whether it was false, but it won't really tell you what hypotheses to have. And those kind of insights you really only get by spending face time with your customers, as we saw from a couple different stories today, like literally going grocery shopping for your customers. So the more data that you can get from your customers about who they are, what their expectations are, what their lives are like, you're going to be able to make better hypotheses about how to serve their needs. How can you collect this feedback? There's lots of different ways. We try to stick our tentacles every which what way into our customers' lives, going and following up with them once a month if they've gone and purchased from us, getting on the phone with them, getting in person with them to go in and talk with them. You heard mentioned earlier today, usertesting.com. We use it. It's a great service, but I should note it is not a replacement for on-site usability testing. I was told years ago that it's really valuable to be able to sit down with a customer who's never actually engaged your product before and have them accomplish a set of tasks right in front of you. And I was like, yeah, but we already know how our product is easy to use or hard to use. And truth told, I didn't know. It was incredibly helpful for our entire team to see the videos of people who had never used our product before sitting down to sign up for our website and getting utterly lost. You'd have things like a task say, add a user. And there's a big green button on the right that says add user. And you're like, oh, they'll just click on it. It's like, and you hear them mum like, no, I can't find it. And you're like, oh, God damn it. You know that add user button is over there, but they don't. And it's really, really hard, no matter how smart you actually, especially if you're smart, to intuit how somebody who's never seen your product before is going to react to it. And there's only one way to really cut through that iron curtain, and that's to sit down in front of them. And it's pretty easy to go and line some folks up in your target demographic on Craigslist and just go in and find some cubbyhole that's got an internet connection, run them through some things, and videotape what they're doing, and their facial reactions are great too. Very, very humbling. And actually, the fact that we went over this as a team helped inspire the energy that we needed to go and run through usability improvements that are continuing to this day. So, like I mentioned, it's very important that you not just try to say, oh, we're going to be like Google and decide what color of blue that we want on all of our menus because we'll be able to test the data. For one, when you're very early stage, you don't have enough data to be able to tell it. So as we were hearing earlier today about it being an art as much as a science, you need to be able to figure out and make an educated guess, make that hypothesis, what your users need, and then you test it, and the data will tell you if you're right or wrong. And there was an interesting discussion earlier as well about whether this thing was a science or an art, but I would say science is an art. That the scientific methodology won't tell you what hypotheses to test. It'll only give you a good process for determining whether those hypotheses were correct or not. It needs that artistic insight to be able to say, hey, this would be an interesting thing to test. So I would say that debate about science versus art is kind of moot. So let me give you an example of one pivot that we did. This came out of a desire for engineering purity in the product. You see, I knew back in 2006 when I launched PBWiki that web-based WYSIWYG was going to be pretty broken for some time to come. That this was going to be a hard problem, and no matter how hard we worked on trying to solve it, it was still going to be a little bit buggy. If you went and pasted something in from PowerPoint, it was going to be a bit janked. Just web editors were all so different. This was going to be a hard problem to solve. And so the right answer was going to be to have users use wiki text. Because then you could just throw up a plain text area, and hey, it would always load really, really quickly. It would always be very highly performant, and this was the right answer. Well, like I say in the first bullet here, being right and $1 gets you on the bus. So you might say, well, that seems plausible. Why did you change your mind about that? And the answer was that we found that people weren't spreading PBWiki in their organizations as fast as we'd like. So we talked to them. We said, well, what's going on? Why aren't you going and sharing this PBWiki thing with your fellow coworkers? And they said, well, I'm pretty smart, but my coworkers are not as smart as I am, and they won't be able to figure this wiki text out. So it was funny because we could actually show that for regular users, wiki text was not difficult to figure out, but there was a perception of it being difficult to figure out that was causing people to not share it with their friends. So perversely enough, we decided we needed to offer a WYSIWYG mode, not that it was actually easier, but that it was perceived to be easier, and therefore the product could be spread. And we did this. And we added WYSIWYG, and people started sharing it with their friends, because then they could pass along the simple message that, hey, it's got a Word-like interface. And so I ate my technical hat and delivered a WYSIWYG editor. Another big pivot that we did was a demographic pivot. We thought we knew who our users were going into this thing. We thought that it was the same sort of folks who sign up for Yahoo groups, right? They're using it for their daughter's softball team or whatever, the kind of casual prosumer market or whatever you want to call that. We started getting a lot of support requests that had email addresses that ended in .edu. So we were a little curious, and then what really got our attention was that we suddenly got a flood of .edu signups, and we said, hey, how did you find out about us? And they said, we loved your presentation in Chicago. We've been avid users since then. And we said, we never went to Chicago. And it turned out that one of our early adopters had actually given a whole conference-length track to a fairly substantial conference of educators about why it was imperative that everybody in the room go and sign up for PBWiki because this was the future of learning. Now, the people at the conference assumed that that must have been some sort of employee of PBWiki or something. And so we're like, there might be something going on here. So we decided to interstitial administrators of their wikis right after they signed in. So you had to answer, what the hell are you doing? And there was about 7 radio buttons randomly sorted, and one of them was, I'm in education, right? And it turns out that 45% of our active administrators were actually were educators at that point in time. We're like, oh, my goodness, okay. So that ended up changing a number of different bits about how we went outbound to market ourselves. It ended up changing certain aspects of the product. For instance, the K-12 market has a lot of users who are under 13, who may not have an email address, or if they do, it's illegal to collect it. So all of a sudden, we had to deal for the very first time with servicing a market where not all the users had email addresses, which was kind of a fundamental assumption that I had baked into the product pretty early on. So there were a number of different product iterations that happened as a result of that. And today, while we've become an enterprise software as a service play, yet another pivot, there's been quite a few, education is still a substantial part of our user base and our revenues. So it was quite a surprise. We never intended to build an educational product. Another pivot it was around pricing. When we launched, it was $5 per wiki per month, and you got an unlimited number of users. The problem was, the most fundamental issue here was that this wasn't really well aligned with the value that the service was providing. You see, people would use wikis for individual projects, but those projects would expire. The projects would end after 3, 4, 5, 6 months. So we'd call them up for their annual renewals, and we'd ask them, hey, would you be interested in renewing? And they say, no, we have no interest in renewing. We're like, oh no, did the product break very badly on you? And they say, no, it was great. But the project that I had the wiki for finished 8 months ago. So I'm not going to renew it for another year. So at this point, I realized that our model had broken pretty badly. What we wanted was to provide service for companies to be able to host as many projects, as many wikis as they'd like, and then charge on a per employee basis. Well, looking around the market after that, I realized that a lot of the other SMB and enterprise software as a service plays were charging on a per seat license, like Salesforce, which we had been using this whole time along. The answer had been staring me in the face, but these things are always obvious in retrospect, right? Just 2 quick anecdotes here of how getting face-to-face or on the phone with customers can really enlighten you. One was a phone call I had. It was a conference call with the CIO of Accenture and a couple other folks. And the result of this 45-minute conference call was that, yes, they would like to purchase PBWiki at $35 per month for their organization. I walked out of that call almost in tears, realizing that the cost of that call to Accenture was probably several decades worth of revenue relative to what we were going to get from them. So that really told me, hey, you need to price appropriately for these businesses. Likewise, I had the founder of People Maps, a UK-based startup, sit down with me face-to-face and tell me how if PBWiki was down for 2-3 minutes, his whole company ground to a halt. And this guy was paying $10 a month for the service. So better aligning pricing with value makes a lot of sense. So we had to actually retool our product and offer companies a network full of all of the wikis they wanted to create that they could go and search across, they could centrally administer, and then charge based on an employee basis. So that was Project Edition, which finally rolled out last year, and that's actually done quite well. It's $20 per employee per month. We've done a bunch of other pivots too. The original model, just to cast a little bit of light on this, was that we were going to do an ad-based model. But it was when I realized that at the CPM rates that we were seeing, that we'd need pretty much every group on Earth to be doing everything on our service in order to make more than beer money. I realized that was probably not such a great idea. So we ended up pivoting to a subscription model. Likewise, we found that Wiki became a bit of a commoditized market. It became a commoditized term. It was very helpful for us at the start because people could come into our service, pbwiki.com, and know, hey, they were getting a hosted wiki, and we didn't need to explain anything to them because they were early adopters. They knew they wanted a private hosted wiki. Great. So it made it very efficient. We had very high percentages going through the sign-up pipeline. But then what happened was that as Wiki became a bit more mass market, as people started talking about Wikipedia, as coders knew that you could download MediaWiki for free, Wiki became synonymous with free in these people's heads. So we found this weird pattern where if folks would call us up and say, hey, we hear you have the best hosted Wiki solution in the world, sign me up, you're awesome. That was kind of code speak for we'd like to pay you $10 a year. And our product had been advancing to go beyond what people were expecting of just a wiki as well. So that was probably one of the biggest pivots that we did. We ended up deciding to rename our company from PBWiki to PBWorks because the customers that called us up saying, hey, you can solve these real solutions for us. Hey, we hear you've got a great customer extranet. Hey, we hear you've got a very flexible project management tool. Those people understood the value that we were able to provide. So that actually turned out to be a really constructive pivot for us. There are a bunch of others also, but I know that we're trying to catch up here, so I won't keep you for very long. The moral of the story here is you really want to talk with your users. Even if you set out to serve a certain audience A, you may find out that you've accidentally started servicing audience B. Be attentive to that and be willing to go and run with that. So the good news is that, yes, we've done a lot of pivots. Yes, a lot of them have been pretty painful. But we went from selling a product that went for $50 a year to a product that now has installs that are worth well north of $50K a year. So that's 3 orders of magnitude right there. It's very worthwhile to go and listen to your customers and to evolve with their needs. So you can succeed by listening to your customer and iterating. So go, do it, listen. That's all. Got time for a question or two. So, batter up.
How did the renaming affect the traffic coming in and search engine optimization?
How was our traffic affected by changing our name from PBWiki to PBWorks? The answer is that not that much. It turned out that because we did our redirects properly, we were able to preserve pretty much all of the traffic. So when people searched for PBWiki, they'd go and find PBWorks pretty readily. And, interesting, they changed their name. Having the PB there, I think, was pretty important so that people knew that it wasn't that we had been acquired by some other company or that we were completely shifting to something totally different. Like they knew that there was some amount of brand consistency. We actually, at the point that we realized we needed to shift away from Wiki, we brought on board a brand consultant and went through a lot of different possible ideas for what we might rename our company to. And one of my favorites, although the domain name was far too long, was Accordions, right? I was going to be the chief accordionist, right? But that probably would have been a bad idea, as you couldn't have pivoted based on that name. And what's interesting is I actually don't know a whole lot of companies that just went and pivoted their name like that. I mean, one I can think of is like Vinny's Synthesite, which renamed to Yola. But yeah, it ended up being a lot less catastrophic than I thought it would be. Just give a holler.
So when you changed from reposition from being a wiki to a project management tool, I understand the redirect worked for your branded search, but how did you target the new set of keywords or the new set of people searching for project management and collaboration and stuff like that? How does that affect your search strategy?
Sure. So the question was, as we pivoted from being just a wiki to project management software, how did that affect our search engine strategy? And the answer is that our paid search efforts, we have a very similar story to Dropbox, actually. We're fairly catastrophic. We hired some very smart people. We spent some good money. But no matter what we did, for better or for worse, we continue to get the same rate of organic adoption. And it was rather shocking when at one point we just said, OK, well, let's see if this is making a difference or not. We totally cut all of our outbound marketing, like sliced about $50,000 a month off of our monthly spend. It didn't change the incoming qualified leads one bit. So I was like, OK, well, we better not spend that money. So the problem that we ran into, precisely the same as Dropbox, is that the keywords that are most obvious, like hosted project management or online project management, are just insanely bid up to the point where you can't get conversions that are cash positive. It doesn't really make sense. Most of the folks that you're competing against are VC funded and are burning dollars in order to try and expand their brand name. But it's not a cash positive endeavor. All right, so I think that's it for me. Thanks so much, everyone.